Hello everyone, it's so good to be here. I'm finally ready to talk about my favorite films of 2023. I know, I'm here way later than just about everyone else on planet Earth. But you know what? I'm totally fine with that. Number one, I keep super busy with my career as a game developer. But two, I really prefer to take as much time as I can to create the most comprehensive year-end list possible. There were so many great films that came out in this single year, and quite a few of them had a relatively late release here in Canada. So not only am I going to go over 40 films that I consider to be rather remarkable, but this will also double as a bit of an Oscar recap. No, I'm not going to go over every single film that was nominated, but I will be talking about many of the winners and nominees whenever the occasion presents itself, which as you'll see will be rather frequently. But perhaps more importantly, I'll be mentioning some snubs, because there are a handful of films on this list that didn't get a single Oscar nomination, which, is to be expected, and I'm not going to lose too much sleep over it, but nonetheless, I do feel that they are worth highlighting. That's the reason why I created this YouTube channel in the first place, to talk about these very things. We should never let these unsung heroes get forgotten in the ages. So yeah, as you may have noticed, this is going to be a rather long video, so grab a cup of coffee, cup of tea, whatever works for you, and enjoy. To start the list, I want to start off with 10 perhaps slightly flawed, but nonetheless exciting and interesting films that are definitely worth your time. This isn't the first time I repeat this kind of message for these year-end lists, but it always bears repeating just in case you have forgotten or this is your first time here. I choose to throw a much wider net than the typical top 5s or top 10s because I feel that every list kind of ends up looking like each other with such a limited amount. And for the bottomless pit, that's just not nearly enough. My appetite is way bigger, and I find that there's so much interesting stuff out there. I always help to believe that inspiration can strike from anywhere, sometimes even from flawed pieces of art. And also these lists, I consider them this kind of historical recap of what cinema was like in a given year. And 2023 in particular was loaded. Yeah, I got 40 films to talk about. So once again, even if some of these films might not be masterpieces, you may be surprised, challenged, inspired, entertained, all of the above, and then some. And imagine these 10 films we're going to start with are the lowest tier on this list. We could consider them as honorable mentions if you would prefer. And one final reason why I do enjoy putting so much time into these year-end lists is because I always get someone who tells me that, they don't make films like they used to. We don't have as many great films. What? Where have you been? Look at all these films. This video is a direct rebuttal to such nonsense accusations. So without further ado, let's get this list started, shall we? So for number 40, I think the best place to start is with the first notable film that came out in 2023. Usually the first week of January is reserved to total trash or other undesirable garbage that Hollywood just wants to get rid of ASAP. Yet lo and behold, Megan proves to be the exception to the rule. It turned out to be quite the horror banger. It's not going to set a new gold standard of what we expect in mainstream horror flicks, but it has a bunch of clever ideas up its sleeves. I know it looks rather cringe and kind of uncanny, and the AI subject may seem a little obtuse from the outside, but don't underestimate it. It has surprising wit and it's got bite too. Next, at number 39, we have a film that most people, if not all people, totally slept on. That would be the biographical sports drama Gran Turismo, a true story adaptation of a rather incredible underdog story that is definitely worth checking out. I can't believe this film has a 48% on Metacritic. That's insane. Whatever you may think of this film, that is an insane score. Maybe the trailer made it look like some low-effort Hollywood garbage, and it's not really a film that's going to reinvent the wheel, no pun intended. But regardless, this is a truly insane true story. Gran Turismo is of course a racing simulation game developed by Sony, and some genius pitched an idea of recruiting some of the most skilled players and turned them into real racing drivers, thus proving how advanced and realistic this racing simulation truly is. It goes without saying that as realistic as a simulation may indeed be, putting gamers in the seat of a 200-mile-per-hour rocket is not the same thing. It's super dangerous, not only to them, but to everyone around them. And yet, a champion was born out of this process. It helps to have a solid cast, even if these aren't necessarily groundbreaking performances. And this also happens to be easily the best Neil Blomkamp film since District 9. Not that that's a very high bar to cross. All his films after District 9 really weren't all that great. All of this to say, don't listen to the critics on this one. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised if you go in with an open mind. And also, personally, me being a game developer, I am quite tickled by this idea of getting trashed for being a gamer and adults telling you, you can't do this, you can never make it in the real world. Oh yes we can, and we did. So yeah, that definitely put a smile on my face. At number 38, we have yet another biographical racing sports drama. this time with Ferrari, directed by none other than Michael Mann. Truly, I think this is his best film in like nearly 20 years. So it's sad not to see more people talking about it. And it is discouraging to see that it was a total box office flop. Where were all the Michael Mann fans? This is the moment you guys were all waiting for. To briefly go over the synopsis, this is a snapshot of Enzo Ferrari's life in the tumultuous year of 1957 as he struggles with quite literally everything. His personal and professional life come crashing together in some very trying ways. Adam Driver gives a solid, albeit rather stoic performance as Enzo Ferrari himself, though that's not a bad thing, mind you. He perfectly addressed the needs of this role. But the real standout performance in this film for me is Penelope Cruz, who gives a furious performance as Laura Ferrari. Any and all Penelope Cruz fans should definitely check this film out, if for no other reason than to see her fire-starter performance. She's a relentless powerhouse in this film. Fortunately, no Oscar nomination for her, or for any other category for this film, unfortunately. But we all already know that she's one of the great living actresses working today. But of course, the real showstopper are the climactic events at the end of this film. Of course, I won't spoil the details for you in case you are unaware of this pivotal moment in racing history. But it is a cinematic moment that will not be leaving your mind anytime soon. Next up, at number 37, yet another film from one of our most respected filmmakers working today. David Fincher's long-awaited The Killer might not be his best film. In fact, it might actually be one of his weaker, if not his weakest film thus far, which is quite a high low point, all things considered. The usual perfectionist cinematography wizardry is on full display here, and that perfectionist lifestyle curiously is mirrored in our assassin protagonist. There are some fascinating takes on the internet that leave so much to ponder in a very meta way. And speaking of our protagonist, we have a bone-chilling, muscular performance from Michael Fassbender, who doesn't get enough credit for the detail-obsessive acting skills on display here. The film is quite a visual and auditory feast for the eyes, and I'm very much amused by the soundtrack just being loaded to the brim with Smith tracks. Not that I'm complaining, because I'm a huge Smith fan myself. God, I love their music. But yeah, it's always a pleasure to see what David Fincher is working on. He truly is one of the most disciplined and unique voices in cinema. At number 36, yet another film from arguably one of the most prolific filmmakers of all time. You may have guessed it, I'm talking about Napoleon, directed by none other than Ridley Scott. Is this film a masterpiece? No, I actually think it's quite flawed. Historical inaccuracies are one thing, or in this case many things, but also I find that the film's pacing struggles quite a bit. And that's not to say that I shy away from long films, far from it. But there are various reasons why I find that the film's runtime drags as much as it does. I literally feel that there's enough topics that this film crosses over that we can extract and make 10 full films out of it. So I do find in many ways that this film skims the surface of many historical battles or historical dramatic moments, and it doesn't explore them as fully as it could have. But I'm more than willing to keep an open mind and still be impressed by the film production aspect of it all, because this is quite the behemoth of a film, even with all its flaws. Visually, it is stunning, the war sequences are grim, and the film has a well-earned 3 Oscar nominations for Best Costume Design, Production Design, and of course visual effects. Joaquin Phoenix, as always, gives a stellar performance as Napoleon, but in my humble opinion, the acting highlight goes to Vanessa Kirby, who played Josephine, his wife. That relationship was one of the dramatic elements I felt the film excelled at the most. It's complicated, uncomfortable, and perhaps in some cases rather cringe. Those sex scenes were they were a vibe, let's just leave it at that. But it does hit at something raw, powerful, bittersweet, especially in the later segments of the film. Once again, I can't help but respect this film on at least some level, because most filmmakers would be absolutely daunted to tackle such a massive and complex and rather impossible project to just cram into one single film. But luckily, we live in a world where Ridley Scott is more than happy to put out 4 films in a couple recent years, then put out Napoleon, this 2.5-hour epic, and then slam us with yet another epic with Gladiator 2 later this year, I think. So yeah, I'll take it, imperfections and all. At number 35, we have the first of the international films nominated at the Oscars. Yes, there will be more. Yo Capitano is a powerful story of 2 young teenagers from Senegal who dream of a better future not only for themselves, but for their family who all live in poverty. They make the grueling journey to travel across Africa to reach Europe through Italy. As you can imagine, this is no simple task. The obstacles they encounter are truly horrifying, yet at the center of it, there's this goodness and camaraderie and humanity that is discovered time and again that makes this into a very uplifting film, even with its trials and tribulations, which are not to be understated. I think you'll be hard-pressed not to have a strong, visceral, emotional reaction to this film. Alrighty, at number 34, I am placing the biggest film of the year. Of course, it is none other than Barbie. Yes, yes, literally everybody went to see this film in the summer, marking a major shift in people's perception of the cinema culture, which was refreshing to see. I was there on Barbenheimer Day, and yes, I was wearing pink. Yeah, Barbenheimer was a vibe, wasn't it? And I love how organically this happened. It didn't feel forced at all. It was just this alignment of stars. It really was a beautiful highlight of 2023. But as much of the box office juggernaut as it was undeniably rather divisive. For my part, I see merit on both sides. It has incredible qualities while also being rather hit or miss in some aspects. And in some instances of the film, it's a total red flag. But most recently, I am amused by people being peeved about the Oscar controversy with this film. And yes, I do see the irony of Ryan Gosling getting the acting nomination while Margot Robbie not getting for actress in a lead role, or Greta Gerwig not getting for best director. The irony is rather a little too perfect, isn't it? It has not gone unnoticed, not only for myself, but for a lot of people. You know what? Ken was the absolute highlight of the movie. He left me in stitches so many times, and I do think he has by far the best moments in the film. You can fight me on that one if you like. Furthermore, for those who are saying that it's an absolute insult that Barbie didn't get those extra Oscar nominations, are absolutely crazy for three main reasons. Number one, this film has 8 Oscar nominations. That instantly puts it in the film history books forevermore. And as if that weren't enough, in case you're forgetting, the film made $1.4 billion at the box office. Number two, better films came out this year. I mean, on this list, we're just at number 34. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to throw shade on the film. I still think it has plenty of merits, especially when it comes to the art direction department. There, it's an absolute banger. But finally, the third point, and indeed that number 3, though people are complaining about Barbie not getting a nomination for Best Directing, what people fail to realize is that Greta Gerwig is setting an incredible record that I don't think enough people are talking about. This is her 3rd feature-length film that she's directing, and each of her films since her debut as a film director has earned a Best Picture nomination, which is the highest honor any film can get at the Academy Awards. Unless I'm very much mistaken, she is the first filmmaker to ever have each of her 3 debuted films in a row get a Best Picture nomination. So in case you need a translation, that equals instant legendary status. So yeah, Barbie is doing just fine. You can all calm down now, please. And anyways, who are you going to take the Best Directing nomination from? Martin Scorsese? Christopher Nolan? Or Justine Triet, since she's the only woman who got nominated for Best Directing? Keep dreaming. If we were to put Barbie and Anatomy of a Fall in a gladiator ring and they had to battle to the death, Anatomy of a Fall will kick the shit out of Barbie, swallow it whole, and not even do the courtesy of spitting its bones out. All this to say, just watch the film for yourself and make up your own damn minds. I'll finish on this film by saying that whatever we thought this Barbie film would be, it was not it. It was surprising, shocking, creative, and batshit crazy at times. For both good and bad. But whatever anyone thinks about this film, I think we'll all agree that we cannot have a conversation of 2023 cinema without bringing up Barbie. So it most definitely deserves its place on this list, wherever it may find itself. That was a mouthful, wasn't it? Moving on to number 33, a film that I really loved upon first watching, but that unfortunately has become rather controversial. But I still want to shout it out because I really do think it has merit and it deserves a moment in the sunlight. Creed 3 is the latest installment in the Rocky and Apollo Creed franchise. And honestly, I think this might be one of the most powerful films of the entire film series. And this also marks the directorial debut of Michael B. Jordan, who not only helms the project as a director, but also still continues to act in the leading role. Of course he does. His anime influences are readily apparent, and he passes the test as a rookie filmmaker with flying colors. But of course, it is impossible to separate the film from its controversy today. Jonathan Majors, soon after the film's release, was arrested for assaulting his ex-girlfriend and has since been found guilty of 2 counts of misdemeanors. It goes without saying that nothing excuses that, but nonetheless, it was a rather thunderous performance with him being the antagonist in this film. And I remember thinking at the time that it was all a bit too meta with the real-life Jonathan Majors and his character Damien in Creed 3, who is a terrifying force to be reckoned with. Yeah, rather eerie stuff. And of course, Stallone does now make an appearance in this film, which felt really tone deaf for a lot of longtime fans. I don't know exactly what's going on, but it seems like there's some political beef going on in the background. But hopefully in the future, Rocky can make a comeback one way or another. At number 32, we have yet another biopic looking at the life of Elvis, but this time through the perspective of his wife, Priscilla. This film captures that feeling the prince is locked away in the ivory tower in fascinating melancholic splendor. It truly is a narrative arc that we've seen so many times in a Sofia Coppola film, and I do truly believe that this is one of her best films in a hot minute. She was the perfect filmmaker to bring that perspective to a story of Elvis's life that we rarely get to see. Kaylee Speeney gives a wonderful performance as Priscilla herself, and Jacob Elordi gives an electrifying performance as none other than Elvis. It's perhaps a more melancholic and subtle performance in comparison to the dynamite performance from Austin Butler back in 2022, but is nonetheless one of my personal standout supporting role performances of 2023. Jacob Elordi truly has incredible charisma on screen, and he has quickly become one of the most interesting new actors working today. If you're remotely interested in Elvis lore or a previous fan of Sofia Coppola, I don't think you want to miss out on this film. And finally, to close off the first 10 films off this list, a film that I feel has gotten a lot of flack for reasons that I don't fully understand. For my part, I think Maestro is a fantastic all-around film production. Yes, yet another biopic drama. There will be more still on this list. Deal with it. But are people upset with Maestro simply on the basis of it being Oscar bait? I mean, maybe it is a little. It did get 7 Oscar nominations, didn't win any of them, but it took some major categories like Best Picture, Actor and Actress in a Leading Role, Original Screenplay, Cinematography, Best Makeup and Hairstyling, and of course, Best Sound. So sure, perhaps I do wish that there were some films that got a little bit more love rather than no nominations whatsoever, and maybe I would have trimmed 1 or 2 awards from this film and given off to those films. But honestly, if the year weren't quite so stacked, I'd probably be bumping this film way higher. Because this film really is a package deal and quite the cinematic tour de force. The story of Leonard Bernstein, the first great American composer, is brought to vivid life thanks to the incredible talent of Bradley Cooper, who co-wrote, directed, produced, and of course acted in the leading role. Indeed, as Matthew McConaughey said at the Oscars, we have a modern Renaissance man. Though I will say that the acting highlight of this film for me was Carey Mulligan, who has some of the most poignant scenes not only of the entire film, but the year as a whole in acting. I think it was spectacular in every sense of the word, and worthy of all 7 of his Oscar nominations. This most certainly is a story worth immortalizing in film. Wow, I felt like I had a lot to say for the bottom 10 films. I do get a little too excited for my own good at times. But as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, even though these films aren't by any stretch of the imagination perfect, they're most certainly worth checking out, and they deserve a moment in the spotlight. Now, I might make an effort to be a little bit more concise moving forward, because otherwise we'll just never see the end of it. There's still another 30 films to talk about, and they're all super potent works, and it's just going to get harder and harder to rank things out the further on we go. So without further ado, let's kick off the top 30. At number 30, we have one of the most ambitious and exciting action films of the year. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 shows that the series still has plenty of creative wind left in reserve. This really is continually one of the most consistent action series of all time at this point. 7 films in and the average hasn't dipped at all. In fact, it might be slightly climbing now. This is an epic 2.5-hour blockbuster loaded with one exciting action sequence after another, and it's paired with a pretty fascinating take on AI. It did get 2 Oscar nominations for Best Sound and Best VFX, which it didn't win any, but really is a bit of the golden standard of what Hollywood action flicks are today. And of course, Tom Cruise shows no sign of aging and proves that he's once again more than willing to take insane risks for the audience. I still can't believe he drove that motorcycle off a cliff. Next, at number 29, we have one of the strangest films this year. Dream Scenario is a wild movie about this middle-aged nobody who all of a sudden starts appearing in people's dreams. It's a hilarious look at how not only the protagonist reacts to his newfound fame, but it's equally fascinating to see how the world interprets it. I mean, it's funny until it's really not. It veers off at some very cringe and damn near horror-like aesthetics at one point. Few films this year have had such a wide tonal shift like this film did. Yikes! I love this film for the most part, and though I do feel even to this day that it loses steam and begins to unravel a little bit too much in its epilogue, it's still a noteworthy film that I highly recommend. And if for no other reason, Nicolas Cage gives one of the best performances of his career, especially in the last recent years, which he does seem to be on a bit of a renaissance, isn't he? Exciting times. I'm curious to see what he does next. Moving on to number 28, we have one of the most harrowing love stories of the year. All of Us Strangers is much more than just a gay romantic drama, which it most certainly is, at least in part. The chemistry between Andrew Scott and Paul Mescal is powerful and deliciously nuanced. I think Paul Mescal is an absolute gem for these intimate indie romantic roles, such as his previous work in Normal People or Aftersun, for which he did get an Oscar nomination for. But the other half of the film is this very eerie and otherworldly reconnection with Adam's parents in his childhood home. It's not much of a spoiler at this point in time, seeing how many trailers and synopsis people have been exposed to at this point in time. But his parents have passed away a long time ago, so it is strange seeing our protagonist basically the same age as his parents were before they died. The film is a truly haunting and heartbreaking exploration of identity, trauma, and the process of opening up and letting go. It is unique, unpredictable, and quite powerful. I couldn't recommend it more, and it's one of those films that I'm truly bummed out to see it not get a single Oscar nomination this year. Speaking of, another film that I'm totally bummed out that didn't get a single Oscar nomination, but honestly, I get it. It's a super crowded competition this year of all years, so it's impossible for everyone to have a slice at the pie. Anyway, The Iron Claw is a biopic drama that depicts the life of the Von Erich brothers, who made waves in the world of professional wrestling sometime in the 1980s. I won't go into too much detail to avoid spoilers, but seeing as this is history, it is a story of both triumph and incredible tragedy. Not gonna lie, this was a really rough watch. The so-called Von Erich curse feels less like a myth and fantasy the further the film goes on. Some people may criticize some of the historical inaccuracies, and to be fair, seeing that this is a biopic film, the biggest head scratcher for me is the omission of one of the Von Erich brothers. In real life, there are actually 6 of them, but in a way I get it because there's already so many competing narrative arcs that if we added yet another person, it might just bog down the script, pacing, and all the film completely. Though even with all the material that they have on hand to deal with, which is plenty, the film manages to deal with it quite well and never buckles under the weight. I guess it helps when you have such a stellar all-around cast to help make this film shine. Of course, the big name is Zac Efron, who gives not only a career highlight performance, but also shows a major left turn in what we usually expect from him. Kevin Von Erich does not have the extrovert charismatic personality we're used to getting from Zac Efron. No, he's actually quite quiet, unsure of himself, and kind of socially awkward. I love the scene where we meet his girlfriend for the first time and she literally has to school him on like the 101s of basic human interactions. Like, hi, how are you? What is your name? Didn't your parents teach you any of these things? It was a really sweet moment actually. He's just standing there dumbstruck by this gal who's totally flirting with him, and she literally has to spell it out for him. But I will say these performances aren't awkward just for the sake of awkwardness. There's so much that's done in the performances from all the Von Erich brothers through silence. There's this oppressive fear that is simply suffocating. Once again, this was a brutal watch for me. You have been warned, but nonetheless, I do highly recommend it. Next up is a film I've been looking forward to since the moment I first heard about it. At number 26, Hayao Miyazaki is back with another film with The Boy and the Heron. It came as such a pleasant surprise because we're all under the impression that he's already retired many years ago with his previous film, The Wind Rises, which, if that would have been his swan song, my god, what an incredible way to end a stellar career. Any filmmaker would have been head over heels proud and in love with to end anyone's filmmaking career on such a high note. But yet here we are with yet another masterful anime project that in many ways feels like a greatest hits album of many of his past works. Indeed, many of the themes we've seen previously from him return it in some way, shape, or form. But after spending time reflecting on the film, there is quite a lot of gold to unpack here. In essence, I see this as a reflection of a master contemplating the worlds he's created and how they will live on, passed on to our offspring. That, paired with the central thematic of time, is quite beautiful, profound, and leaves me hungry to rewatch this film over and over again. I'm pretty sure we will all be doing this for years to come. And who knows, this might actually be for reals now the final film we get from Hayao Miyazaki, seeing that he is pushing 83 years old now. So I don't think anyone should be complaining that he won the Oscar for Best Animated Feature Film. This film is most deserving of the highest praise we can give it. And of course, it goes without saying, this film is a visual feast for the eyes. I mean, it is a Studio Ghibli animation project after all. What were you expecting? Yeah, this film is absolutely unmissable. And for those who didn't really enjoy it that much on first watch, you know what? Sit with it, reflect on it, and I'm pretty sure over time it will grow on you plenty, as it already has for me. Now, this may be a bit of a hot take, but my favorite anime film of 2023 is actually Suzume. This is a wonderful coming-of-age fantasy tale from the beloved Japanese filmmaker Makoto Shinkai. This actually earned the title as the 4th highest-grossing Japanese film of all time, and Lord knows we have all the reasons in the world to have such a resounding commercial and critical success. It is a spellbinding tale of Suzume, a young girl caught up in this quest to prevent natural disasters from occurring across Japan by helping seal these magical doors. I won't go into further detail, but this is an exciting, passionate, and fiercely creative anime film unlike anything you'll see this year. Except for Master Hayao Miyazaki's work, of course. But even so, it is a one of a kind, and I dare say I've never thought that I'd see so much creativity done with a chair in a film. What? I'll just leave it at that. Go watch the film. It is glorious, and I do find that it's a total shame that this film wasn't nominated at the Oscars for Best Animated Feature Film. I don't care if it won or not, but I do think it's kind of a crime. It should have been standing toe-to-toe with Hayao Miyazaki's work. Moving on to number 24, You Hurt My Feelings proves that, once again, a lean and mean drama with no VFX whatsoever still has the power to capture our hearts and captivate our minds. Essentially, the film is about family dynamics in a long-standing marriage. All is relatively well in their lives until one day Beth accidentally overhears her husband give his actual honest thoughts on the book she's writing, and she's devastated by the realization that he wasn't being fully honest with her. This film is a screenwriting gem that I was hoping to see get a screenwriting nomination at the Oscars this year, but truly, that category of all categories this year was just super stacked, so there was no hope of that happening whatsoever. Nonetheless, this is a lovely slice of life and a very nuanced take on this very delicate familial matter. I loved it, and you should definitely check it out. Following in the same vein of simple human dramas, with no VFX or any action sequences to speak of, at number 23, Perfect Days explores the life of a humble Japanese man who finds the beauty in everyday life, even in the lowliest of jobs, as a toilet scrubber. It is a beautiful, soulful, and existential zen-like film-going experience. Even though the protagonist barely speaks a word throughout most of the movie, there's incredible inner richness that is impossible to miss. And speaking of the protagonist who barely speaks, not kidding, I thought for a while that he wasn't going to utter a single word in the film, and I would have been totally okay with it. Even with that, it was such an expressive and powerful performance, and indeed he was awarded a well-deserved Best Actor award at the Cannes Film Festival. I wonder how many other performances had so little words spoken that have received such praise. Truly, I think this film merits more than one viewing, to analyze all the micro details that are perhaps a little too subtle to fully pick up on a single sitting. It might be a little too bare bones and ambient for some viewers, but for those who go in with an open mind and keep this soul-searching perspective, I think you'll find a veritable goldmine hidden in the depths of this gem. It is also worth mentioning that this film was nominated for Best International Film for Japan, but curiously enough, it is actually directed by famous German filmmaker Wim Wenders. This film truly is an inspiration, and I endlessly debated whether I should push it much further up the list, but honestly, these lists are impossible as is, so I don't care where it is on the list as long as you guys know that this film is absolutely wonderful and you should definitely give it a shot. At number 22, we're chaining yet another Best International Film nominee at the Oscars, this time with Society of the Snow. Now, I already know the story quite well. As a young kid, I watched the 1993 film Alive, which made an impression on me forevermore. So I knew exactly what I was getting myself into with this film, which is why I pushed it back so far down the line as far as I could. And even with the mental preparation and me already knowing the content of the film, nothing could have prepared me for this kind of visceral and emotional experience I went through watching this film. This recreation of the 1972 plane crash in the heart of the Andes. It is a harrowing watch. I remember talking to a friend and they were asking, did they really have to do that? I get it. It's impossible to even think of, but I think it's impossible for us to fully comprehend just how bitterly cold it was over there. They did not have proper sheltering. The plane was literally just cut in half without any proper sealing, and they didn't have any proper clothes either for that kind of environment. So their bodies were working overtime and burning so many calories just to stay functional, not even to stay warm. And on that note, the film did earn a well-deserved second Oscar nomination for Best Makeup and Hairstyling, which they truly did an incredible job of making all the actors look haggard and weak and just drained of life. Yeah, this is quite the ordeal, if we could even call it that. Not gonna lie guys, I shed more than one tear watching this film. And to close off this group of 10 films, I'm gonna go out on a limb and choose a film that many people absolutely detested. I feel like on my year-end list, I always have to choose at least one film that's gonna be controversial, and I think this one's gonna do it, so here we go. No laughing matter, I promise you. At number 21, I am choosing Sound of Freedom. Am I already instantly cancelled? Yes? No? Maybe? For those of you who are oblivious of what this film is, it is a hair-raising true story of a former federal agent who embarks on a perilous undercover journey to save children from sex traffickers. It is a horrifying and heartbreaking reality, and this film helps shed a light on that. For my part, I think this is an incredibly effective film, especially when you consider how low budget the film is. I've seen films with triple the budget not be nearly as effective or well realized. Most notably for the final act of the film, deep in the Colombian jungles, which I have heard some people compare to a Metal Gear Solid stealth mission, and I do feel that the comparison is rather appropriate. But most of all, the look of devastation in the eyes of the children, the parents, and finally in Jim Caviezel's eyes is an image that is seared in my mind. In essence, I see this film mirroring the hero arc, though adapted to a modern problem of rather sickening proportions. Which begs the question, why this rabid need to shut this film down? Can't we all agree that this, of all things, is a major problem in this world? I mean, granted, yes, it's one of many problems. That next to a potential nuclear cataclysm, which it goes without saying, God forbid something like that should ever happen. But what, we can't even talk about this? What, would we not talk about Epstein's Island, for example? I'm sure some would love it if nobody would talk about that. Point is, it's something of a miracle that this film actually ever saw the light of day. The film had to push through so much red tape from what I can tell. From what I recall, the film is like 5 years delayed because of all that pushback. And to be fair, some of the political criticisms surrounding this film may have some merit. Notably, some of the dubious financial sources financing this film might be worthy of questioning, but some of it, respectfully, sounds like horseshit to me. And it seems like it's something used as a cudgel to just silence any debate or thought whatsoever surrounding this film and its subjects. Think what you will of this movie, but I don't think we can separate this film from cinema history in 2023. This thing sure kicked the hornet's nest and it pissed off a lot of people. So that at the very least counts for something and easily makes its way into history books as far as I'm concerned. I wonder how many people are going to stop watching after that last one. Variety is the spice of life? Sorry, that joke was in terrible taste. I know. But luckily we can move on to the top 20, and these next films are just getting progressively more arduous for me to rank. So as always, take it with a small grain of salt. They're all bangers. Who cares where they rank? At number 20, we have the gargantuan action epic John Wick Chapter 4. John Wick is back at it again. Will this be his last outing? Maybe, maybe not. But if there ever would be a fifth, I think we have all the reason in the world to be super excited about it, because this series shows no signs of slowing down. You'd think by the fourth film the creative fires would just fizzle out by now. But that could not be further from the truth. This film feels like a phoenix rising from the ashes, flaming stronger than ever before. This film goes so hard. Once again, the John Wick series shows off what I consider to be the best cinematography in any action film to date. Not only when it comes to filming immersive action scenes, which once again the stunts are industry best in their complexity, creativity, and volume. This film is a whopping 2 hours and 49 minutes in length. And sure, some of the sequences might get a little too wild, though if you suspend your disbelief, you're in for one hell of a ride. Honestly, this film is just so much fun to watch. But beyond the action, the lighting and visual composition are some of the most memorable shots you'll see in any film this year. It literally turns action cinema into poetry. The environments as well are intricately detailed, gaudy, and mesmerizing, and as a game developer, specifically a level designer, I am so inspired by the environments they chose to use in this film. And it's also lovely to see Paris shot in such a spectacular way. God, I love that city. Because of work, I get to travel there from time to time, so it is fun to recognize iconic areas that I've visited during my trips. And of course, we can't forget that Hotline Miami inspired sequence in the film. That was so cool. Yeah, there's no short of reasons why this film kicks so much ass. The creative fire burns bright in this film. Hot damn! And it is a shame that the Academy has yet to recognize the brilliance of this phenomenal action franchise that crushes all competition in its way. But you know what? That's their problem. For those who know, we know how good it is. God, this movie kicks ass. At number 19, we have the Canadian biopic drama of Blackberry. I actually was totally clueless that this is a Canadian story. Go figure. This is a striking drama that portrays the creation and the incredible growth of the BlackBerry mobile phone, which was the world's first smartphone that absolutely dominated the market at the time. Until, that is, its inevitable crushing demise. It's actually a super tragic tale. The film has this docudrama style of filmmaking, think of The Office, and the film features these wild tonal shifts that will blow your hair back. On one hand, we have the tech nerds who geek out among themselves. It's quite cute and juvenile, really, but that is savagely contrasted once they're invaded by their new investor, Jim Balsillie, who has this cutthroat corporate shark personality. And yes, his name really is Balsillie. Jokes will be made about his name in the film, don't you worry. He was brilliantly played by Glenn Howerton. It is a raucous drama that ends quite tragically, as we all know today. And it is rather shocking to see how poorly it did at the box office. The film had a relatively low budget of $5 million, and it made $2.9 million at the box office. Ouch! Where were you guys? This is a great movie. I highly recommend it, not only as an interesting drama, but also as a legitimate cautionary tale. It was quite the whirlwind experience, and the final frame of this film honestly left a bit of a lump in my throat. At number 18, we have one of my favorite romantic dramas of the year. Fallen Leaves is the latest film from esteemed Finnish filmmaker Aki Kaurismäki. This is such a sweet and lovely little drama, and I do mean little. It has a total runtime of 81 minutes, so it's easily the shortest feature-length film on this list. But even with its short runtime, it never loses any of its potency or nuance. It's a bit of an awkward relationship about these two lonely souls who happen to meet each other in a bar and try to spark up the relationship further. But let's just say that they have interesting obstacles that come in the way. It is an amusing, smart, and rather melancholic story, and though it is rather simplistic in its nature, there's quite a lot of work put into the cinematography that works wonders. Most notably the color palette and the set decorations. And FYI, it's actually one of my favorite films this year that uses color as a narrative tool. There are some really clever and subtle mise-en-scène details that got me super excited. Finally, I'm kind of shocked that it didn't get a nomination for Best International Film at the Oscars. I thought this was a no-brainer considering that everyone, critics alike, totally loved this film. So yeah, that was a bummer. At number 17, we have the scariest horror film I've seen in years. Of course, it's none other than Talk to Me. This was a profoundly shocking and eerie horror film that really got under my skin, which is remarkable when you consider that this is the debut film from Danny and Michael Philippou, two young Australian filmmakers who made their bones as YouTubers under the name of Raka Raka. And since watching the film, I had a chance to check out their YouTube channel, and gotta say, this is some of the wildest shit I've ever seen on YouTube. And watching interviews with them, they do seem like a bunch of Mad Hatters. These guys are a riot. But back to the film, I truly do believe that this is one of the most inventive horror films I've seen in years. I won't go into details to avoid spoilers, of course, but the very nature of the horror makes it inherently unpredictable, and it also uses comedy in a clever way to lower your guard, to then shock you to your core. This is actually the only time ever in my life that I had to walk out of the cinema to just literally just walk it off and shake it off because I felt like I literally had bad juju attached to me. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not like I'm saying this is the scariest movie of all time, but I was not prepared for this shit. Talk to Me is a horror banger. Next, number 16 is not a horror film, but it was kind of terrifying too, actually. Godzilla Minus One is a film that became a bit of a worldwide sensation due to word-of-mouth hype. Everyone, myself included, didn't really think much of a Godzilla film. A lot of that has to do with those American action monster films that they made, which were fine and entertaining, but nothing revelatory. But this is not some American Hollywood rehash for a quick buck. No, this is a stone-cold Japanese film, exploring a ravaged post-World War II Japan that is trying to recover the broken pieces of its nation. As if that weren't demoralizing enough, all of a sudden the people of Japan must contend with this new threat, a mutated dinosaur-like monster known as Godzilla. And the end result is simply devastating. In essence, I see this as an incredible story of struggling with impossible adversity. There's a profound focus on community, family, responsibility, honor, and a sense of redemption after all the atrocities of the war. I am blown away by how nuanced the human drama is in this film. I don't think anyone thought we would be getting that from a Godzilla film of all things. And yet here we are. And it should have been obvious to me for a long time now that Godzilla is this perfect nuclear metaphor for a post-World War II Japan. Of course that had such a gigantic cultural and traumatic impact on their nation. And though a lot of the film's focus is on the human drama, admittedly, don't you worry, the scenes with Godzilla are unforgettable. This isn't the amusing monster mash we're used to getting from Americans. Maybe at first glance we had this knee-jerk reaction of cinema excitement like, oh, here's the monster coming, but that swiftly turned to horror. It was grim, and this Godzilla is fucking terrifying. The destruction Godzilla wreaks on the people of Japan is heart-wrenching and graphic. The few action scenes that exist are perfectly balanced with the film's drama. You will get your bang for your buck in that regard. And speaking of money, Godzilla has a shockingly low budget for a film of its kind. It had a budget of like roughly $10 to $12 million when converted to our currency. Now I know I might be stating the obvious here, but that kind of budget is peanuts for the daunting task of creating this gigantic monster stomping through cities. And you know what? It clobbered all films this year that had $100, $200 million, if not $250 million budget. And yes, it 500% earned its Oscar for Best Visual Effects. That moment blew my mind. It was a highlight of the night, and I still can't believe it actually happened. Sometimes there is justice in the world. Yeah, Hollywood, put that in your pipe and smoke it. This was without question the underdog win of the night, and the internet was set ablaze in celebrating this historic win. Finally, I thought it was really cute how the VFX team who came at the Oscars, they came with their Godzilla figurines. I thought that was really sweet. And I didn't learn this until much later, but their footwear is also Godzilla themed. That is so awesome. I love it. Things are getting more and more interesting with each film that I mentioned here, isn't it? God, this year on list in particular is just stacked. But I'm enjoying myself, and I hope you are too. At number 15, we are blessed with the latest Alexander Payne film, The Holdovers. This is the story of a curmudgeon classics professor at a New England prep school who's got this know-it-all attitude. He remains on the school grounds during Christmas break to babysit a handful of students that are stuck there over the break along with the school's head cook. There's quite a bit of drama involved, but ultimately he forms a unique bond with one of the students that remain there. The way I see it, this is a story about lonely people who find themselves and end up helping each other out. It truly is a touching and thought-provoking story. And it's also a viciously smart and funny film too. The wordplays are so smart and creative, and they left me in stitches throughout the whole film. This marks a much deserved re-collaboration with Paul Giamatti and Alexander Payne, the last film being their only film, which was back in 2004 or 5 with Sideways, that cult classic wine tasting film. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. There's actually a bit of an uproar at the time that Paul Giamatti, not only did he not win the Oscar, but he wasn't even nominated for it. Everyone thought that this wasn't even a question at that time. So it is wonderful to see him get an Oscar nomination for this film. It truly is one of the best performances of his career and a major acting highlight of the year at large. And frankly, the entire cast is stellar actually. Da'Vine Joy Randolph is sensational in this film. This was the easiest prediction in the world to know that she was going to be taking home the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress that night. Once again, she was absolutely sensational in this film. And Dominic Sessa delivers a remarkably nuanced performance with grace and wit in his first acting role. He's definitely one to watch if he continues to act beyond this film. It is worth mentioning that The Holdovers was nominated for a total of 5 Academy Award nominations: Best Picture, Best Original Screenplay, Best Actor, Best Actress in a Supporting Role, which it did win, and Best Editing. I strongly believe that this film has the potential of becoming a new holiday classic that we'll be watching years down the line because it truly is a marvelous and thought-provoking drama. Next up at number 14, in a somewhat similar vein as The Holdovers, American Fiction is one of the smartest and funniest films that 2023 had to offer. This is the story of a writer frustrated by the works of other authors who have found much greater success with their shallow writing, capitalizing on offensive tropes from the black entertainment in comparison to his well-written books. It is such a biting and intelligent satire that explores not only the portrayal of black culture in media space, but also gives some thought-provoking commentary on universal human struggles. It has an incredibly nuanced and powerful screenplay that I was blown away to see that it actually won an Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay. I did not see that one coming, though I was pleasantly surprised because it totally deserves it. It's even more impressive when you take into consideration that this is Cord Jefferson's debut filmmaking attempt. Hot damn, I'm curious to see where he goes next after this film. And on that note, there truly have been stellar works from debut filmmakers this year, haven't there? Anyway, the wordplay in this film is absolute fire from beginning to end. The delivery of those lines is electric due to the veritable goldmine of acting highlights. Jeffrey Wright gives a career best performance here, and Sterling K. Brown also delights, surprises, and challenges as the brother in this film. And they both earned Oscar nominations for acting in this film, 100% deserving of that recognition. Though there are countless smaller roles in the film, they are all equally potent no matter how short their screen time may be. This truly is a revelatory drama that I can't stop singing high praises to. Finally, I was overjoyed when I learned that it got 5 Oscar nominations for Best Picture, Best Actor in a Supporting Role, Best Adapted Screenplay, which it did win, and Best Score. This film is awesome. Check it out. At number 13, we have a humble little film that has flown under many people, if not all people's radars. Even so, I believe that this is one of the best dramas of the year. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret is a coming-of-age story of an 11-year-old girl who moves out of the city, abandoning all her friends and her usual habits to move into the suburbs with her family. It's an era of massive change for young Margaret, not only with her new home that's taking some getting used to, but now she must navigate the reality of making new friends, experiencing new emotions, and finding both her identity and place in this world, all the while dealing with the awkward nature of puberty looming on her horizon. It is a tender and heartfelt drama that approaches very intimate and personal topics that could be considered taboo if poorly handled. But here, they are treated with shocking nuance and grace. The cast is excellent from top to bottom, featuring both young actors and some cinema veterans, such as Kathy Bates, Rachel McAdams, and even Ben Safdie in a small role. It's surprising to consider that it took nearly 50 years for Judy Blume's classic novel to finally get a screen adaptation of this classic story. But my god, was it worth the wait to find the perfect writer-director to bring this story to life. Kelly Freeman Frege totally knocked it out the park with this one. It's unfortunate that it didn't get a single Oscar nomination this year, but I can't say that I'm particularly surprised. It is rather niche and not many people really gave it too much attention, which really is unfortunate, so definitely keep an open mind and check it out because I do think it is one of the best films of the year and perhaps my feel-good film of the year. It's nice to have something that's not so dark and gloomy all the time every now and then. Which incidentally is exactly where we're going with the next picks. At number 12, we have one of the most polarizing films of the year. May December is the latest film from esteemed filmmaker Todd Haynes, and as usual, he doesn't shy away from sticking his nose in some really messy and uncomfortable dramas. This film is loosely inspired by the Mary Kay Letourneau scandal, if you know about that. But here we have an actress played by Natalie Portman come to spend time with the woman who she will portray in an upcoming film. The woman in question, played by Julianne Moore, is a controversial figure due to her infamous 23-year-long relationship with her husband. The important detail to keep in mind, of course, is that the relationship started when he was 13 years old and she was 36. Red flag? You bet. Somehow people still label this film as a comedy, which never made any sense whatsoever in my mind. If anything, I feel this is much closer to a film noir in substance and style than anything resembling a comedy. A lot of that has to do with the edgy soundtrack, but above all, it's the way the film slowly peels back the layers behind the masks of each character that inherently transforms the experience into this investigative journey. Even Natalie Portman's character has a lot more going on to her than one may initially expect. Each scene is incredibly revealing to the true nature of each character represented. I really want to avoid going deep down the rabbit hole with this one because you guys should definitely check it out for yourselves, but I will say that the three characters here are acted to perfection. Frankly, I'm shocked that all three did not get an Oscar nomination for this film. I was convinced that these would be surefire bets. Without question, some of the biggest snubs this year as far as I'm concerned. Though thankfully, it did get a well-deserved nomination for Best Original Screenplay, so at least we can content ourselves with that. In any case, this is a scandalous, complex, and fascinating drama that I just couldn't take my eyes off. It left me floored. And finally, before reaching the top 10, a film that could easily be in the top 10 and perhaps should be, but honestly, it's the kind of film that I never want to watch again. The Zone of Interest is without question the most harrowing film-going experience any of us have had in the cinema all year long, or any other year for that matter, and for years to come. I hope history doesn't prove me wrong on that one. If somehow you remain unaware of what this film is about, essentially it shows the life of a family that have built their dream home. They have a big mansion, maids, a handful of children, a garden, a pool, everything you could have hoped for, and then some. Now, the important detail to this family is that the father figure is none other than Rudolf Höss, the longest-serving commandant of Auschwitz. And it just so happens that their home borders with the wall of the concentration camp. You literally see it in most frames of the film. It's right there. As you can imagine from the premise, this is an excruciating film viewing experience. But the part that is even more unsettling is that the film doesn't focus on the atrocities happening right next door. No, instead we focus on the mundane life of Höss, his wife, and the children going about their day as if they can't see the smoke smoldering off screen. We never see any of the evil being committed, but we hear it. This is one of the most eerie and uncomfortable listening experiences I've ever had in the cinema. So it totally deserves its Oscar that it won for Best Sound. Incidentally, the film also won for Best International Film, and it was nominated for a total of 5 Oscars, the other nominations being for Best Picture, Directing, and Adapted Screenplay. Once again, this is a film that I never want to watch again, but I'd say a single viewing is at the very least mandatory, seeing that humanity clearly hasn't learned its lessons since then. It is a brutal reminder of what happens when we dehumanize any group of people, and it's something that can never happen again. Oh my god. Yeah, that movie was brutal, but powerful nonetheless. Moving on. Here we are at the top 10 films of 2023. I've shuffled these 10 films around countless times, but in the end, I'm quite thrilled with the choices. It's kind of impossible to rank not only these films, but also putting them in front of any of the films we saw in the top 20. I mean, they're all great films, and each in their own unique ways. You know, it's like comparing apples and oranges, cats and dogs. What do you prefer? Personally, I'm more into doggos, but whatever. Yeah, 2023 was just one of those years in cinema where there was just this groundswell of incredible creativity. And these next 10 films truly are, in my opinion, the most remarkable films of the bunch. I revisit them countless times in my mind, or in some cases, I've rewatched them already on several occasions. They're just that good, and they're not getting old anytime soon. And also, some of these films that we're going to see didn't get a single Oscar nomination, so this is a great opportunity for me to just highlight them and to let you know that they are the shit. To start off the top 10, I'm going to choose a film that I don't think I've seen on any year-end list from anyone whomsoever, as far as I can tell. Please correct me if I'm wrong, otherwise I am writing this in right fucking now. I am choosing Air. Yes, this is the biographical sports drama depicting the financial and cultural struggles of Nike in the year 1984, and explores the visionary Sonny Vaccaro, Nicki's infamous basketball guru, in his pursuit of Michael Jordan before he became a household name. If you think that this is just a marketing film for the Air Jordans, you are not paying attention. This is one of the most uplifting and inspiring films 2023 has to offer. I think he's nothing short of visionary how Sonny Vaccaro recognizes the greatness in Michael Jordan and went balls to the walls to build the entire marketing identity of the company around this one man. Not just some other great basketball player to passively bring under the company's wing. No, but to elevate him to the status of legend, to the thing that keeps us up at night, that makes us dream of the impossible. He believed it so deeply, and Michael Jordan knew he was it. It's actually incredible when you think about it. I also think that's a genius filmmaking move that we never see the face of the actor who plays Michael Jordan, because indeed, it's not his story. His story is coming right after this film ends. It has less to do with him and more with the incredible leap of faith that was taken by the leadership at Nike on this player. Ben Affleck is back with his latest directing effort, and this marks a new collaboration with all-time buddy Matt Damon. Though it is worth noting that they didn't write the screenplay together. Yes, it would have been fun. Of course, we all remember when they won an Oscar together for Good Will Hunting. That was quite an underdog story for the history books. No, it was written by Alex Convery, who shows remarkable talent, seeing that this is his first film that he worked on. This film is funny as hell and features some of the best banter I've heard in any film this year, and it absolutely kills me that it didn't get a single Oscar nomination. Whatever. Finally, the cast is killer good. We have an all-star cast that plays off each other splendidly, even in small roles. Chris Tucker shows off his usual comedic timing, but with a shocking dose of potent drama that should not be overlooked. Though perhaps my favorite would have to be Viola Davis, who, as usual, delivers a sledgehammer performance, this time as Michael Jordan's mother. This movie rules, and every time I watch it, I'm just inspired to high heaven. Moving on to number 9, a film that I totally loved upon first viewing, but after much reflection and opportunities to discuss with friends, and discovering plenty of little interesting details across the internet, it just grew exponentially in my mind. I'm talking about Emerald Fennell's Saltburn. This is yet another film on this list that has gotten relatively mixed reception. Some people absolutely loved it, others totally hated it. I get it, it's a wild and shocking film for plenty of reasons, not least because of the nature of the sexual content in this film. Which, whatever you expect that to be, I promise you, you will not see it coming. This film actually is full of surprises that will keep you guessing right up until the very end. To give a brief premise of the film, Oliver, played by Barry Keoghan, is a student at Oxford who develops a strong fixation on this aristocratic student named Felix, played by none other than the infectiously charismatic Jacob Elordi. Their friendship grows to the point where Felix invites Oliver to his eccentric family's mansion for the summer. And I'll just leave it at that. The rest is best to just experience for yourselves. Once again, this film will keep you guessing right up until the end. It's hard to know where to start praising this film. I believe that it has one of the strongest all-round casts of any film this year. There are acting gems aplenty, no matter how short an actor's screen time may be, and I think it's a crime that the film didn't get a single Oscar nomination, especially in the acting category. I understand that the competition this year is maybe a little too tight for set decoration or cinematography or screenplay. I would still totally consider it, mind you. This is exactly where I pillage 1 or 2 nominations from Maestro, for example. Once again, not hating on that film. But to omit anything for acting? Are you kidding me? Yeah, we really dropped the ball in that regard. I thought Rosamund Pike was a surefire bet for having a nomination for supporting actress. And Barry Keoghan proves once again that he's one of the most powerful, exciting, interesting, and weird new actors working today. He goes so far in this film in ways that literally made my jaw hit the floor. Not going to spoil anything, but there is one infamous scene later in the film that was totally unscripted and he kind of improvised that left not only the viewers shocked, but the entire filming crew like, oh my god, what is happening? Keep rolling! Yeah, this guy's insane, but in the best way possible. And I totally would have loved to see him get another Oscar nomination, but it is a stacked year. The acting prowess on its own would land this film super high on this list, but it also happens to be a total powerhouse when it comes to art direction. Saltburn has some of my favorite cinematography of any film this year. It features beautiful visual compositions as well as a wide range of color palettes, and there are so many iconic shots. Perhaps one that really sticks out to me is that incredible mirror sequence, just to name one, and a very brief moment at that too. In fact, Saltburn is loaded with so many smart mise-en-scène details that will probably go way over your head on a first viewing. There are truly some really neat little mysteries hidden in plain sight for you to discover. Beyond that, the set decoration is lavish, gorgeous, and much the same can be said about the costume design. So yeah, I think this film is a total banger, and to be fair, I can respect people who weren't quite as keen on it. Now, as always, to each their own. I've also heard that this film shares a lot of similarities with The Talented Mr. Ripley, which, you know, Perhaps, but I have yet to see that film. So I am curious if maybe one day my impression of this film would evolve, having added that to my film repertoire one day. But until then, for my part, I think Saltburn is an unforgettable thriller that I was fully engrossed in. Oh. Next, at number 8, this is one that won't come as a surprise to anyone. 2023 has really been a rough year for the superhero genre, hasn't it? We've had plenty of flops or lukewarm films at best. Truly, it feels like the landscape of cinema has been rather oversaturated with these massive Hollywood productions of superhero films. And I think everyone is simply exhausted by it all, myself included. What even is the next Marvel film that's on the radar? I don't actually know. Though there is one gigantic exception. That will be the beyond sensational Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which is a direct sequel to the beloved 2018 animated film Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And that film already was so sensational and so groundbreaking that it was hard for us to imagine how anyone could make a sequel that would not only match the quality but surpass it. And yet that's exactly what Across the Spider-Verse does. It catapults itself so far and beyond what any of us expected it could be. The creativity in the animation on display here is unlike anything we've seen before. It is light years beyond the entire competition. There are so many incredible creative ideas crammed into this one film that it makes one dizzy trying to piece it all together. Not only is this a visual roller coaster ride, but it has a solid beating heart at the core of its story. It's hard to feel hurt about it not winning the Oscar for Best Animated Feature Film. I mean, if you are going to lose someone, it might as well be the grandmaster of anime himself, Hayao Miyazaki. But I do feel like this film should have been up for Best Picture and Best VFX as well. Especially the Best VFX thing. Like, Godzilla, still take that Oscar, you totally deserve it. But this thing crushes everything I've seen this year in terms of pure visual splendor and the complexity, density, and just this is literally the greatest superhero movie of all time as far as I'm concerned. So with that being said, I can't wait for the third film. For all of you working on it, take your time, guys. If the final chapter of this story is going to be anything close to as good as this thing, we will wait as long as it takes for you to make it into the masterpiece it deserves to be. At number 7, we have another film that has received rather mixed reviews, but I couldn't care less. I thought it was phenomenal. Asteroid City is the latest film from none other than Wes Anderson, and it's a bewildering film in a way that only someone like Wes Anderson could make. If you weren't a fan of Wes Anderson before, I don't know that this is the film that's going to convince you, because it is Wes Anderson on steroids. Wes Anderson squared. It is so surreal, so potent, so out there, and it is a film that constantly breaks the fourth wall in several layers. It's actually kind of mind-boggling and hilarious. It's a super dense film. I feel like I watched like 5 hours of film crammed into like an hour 40 minutes. Sometimes within a single scene, there's like 3 different like narrative tracks going on at the same time. In fact, I don't even know like where to begin to give a synopsis of this film. It is so dense, complex, and all over the place, but somehow there's order to the madness. I guess it is a bit of an acquired taste, and once again, if you're not a Wes Anderson fan, I don't know that this is going to do it for you. You're probably just going to look at this like, what the hell is happening here? But I think one thing everyone can agree on is that the art direction is simply phenomenal. The lines of composition, the props, the color palette, everything is so meticulously crafted, and the way it's all beautifully choreographed with the camera movement, the editing, it is so snappy and so Wes Anderson-y. There really is no other way of describing it. And on top of that, if you do enjoy seeing all-star cast, well, I mean, I think this is like the biggest all-star cast of any film, maybe not ever, but it's definitely shooting for the stars. I'm not even going to read out the credits list because it's pretty gigantic. Who isn't in this movie? And they all give wonderful performances. It's hard to single out one person who does a better job than the other. They all have such a dense, like, machine gun style of delivering lines in, once again, this very Wes Anderson-like style. It really does feel like we have like several films just like crush into one. But it works, and it kind of blows my mind every time. And speaking of several films, Asteroid City on its own is already more than enough for any filmmaker to take on. But here we are with not just one short film, The Wonderful Life of Henry Sugar, which is a Netflix short that everyone knows about, and it actually did win the Oscar for Best Live Action Short, which, if you ask me, is like, that was obviously going to happen. But generally speaking, that category is reserved to like rookie filmmakers, and this could be a really amazing opportunity for them to get a foot in the door. But when you're going up against a grandmaster like Wes Anderson, I mean, like, that's kind of unfair. But at the same time, The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar is so powerful and potent. This 40-minute film can go toe-to-toe with any and all films that are on this list and probably still come out on top. It's literally that good. And as I started alluding to before, we thought that that was the only short film he put out. But no, there were an additional 3 other short films that he put out as well in this single year. Why has the marketing not been talking about this film? I'm a bit of a film buff myself and I had no idea any of this was going on. How did this happen? So yeah, we basically got 5 Wes Anderson projects in a single year, which is kind of crazy. Or 2 feature-length films if you want to calculate it that way. Whichever way you look at it, 2023 was a pretty phenomenal year for us Wes Anderson fans. And before reaching the top 5, I got one last film here that I think many people might disagree with me on. And to be fair, like, I get it. Like, sometimes I wonder myself, like, why do I like this movie so much? I don't even know if I would describe myself as like it because I'm so perplexed and kind of disturbed every time I think about it. Maybe you guessed it by now, but at number 6, I'm putting Beau is Afraid. Yeah, that movie. This is a horror like unlike anything I've seen, not only this year, but forever, I think. What the hell was this movie? It really is a bit of a downward spiral, isn't it? Now, I guess the things we can universally agree that are pretty phenomenal is the cinematography and especially the environment design, which is so intricate and layered and so out there. Throughout these 3 acts of the film, we have this massive range of environments that are created here, and they're so layered and intricate. This is definitely a film that I would love to just study frame by frame. And of course, Joaquin Phoenix is back again, giving yet another amazing performance, as he always does. Personally, I think this is his acting highlight of the year, not quite in Napoleon. But even so, it is a bit of a weird one. He has this like perpetual look of like utter shock and horror, and he's just always screaming like, oh my god, what is this happening to me? And indeed, why is this all happening to him? It's basically like one series of unfortunate event after another, right until the very end. And it's all kind of totally out of his control. So as the protagonist, it is a bit of a weird thing. He has no agency in any of the shit that happens to him. Poor guy, holy shit. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you guys. This is an incredibly frustrating experience and probably my biggest personal red flag on this list. Like, it makes me wonder, are you okay, Mike? What do you see in this movie? But what can I tell you? I just couldn't take my eyes off it. It's kind of like watching a car crash. Like, oh my god, look at that. There I am getting a little too excited and kicking the microphone stand. Yeah, what a beautiful mess. I'll just leave it at that and we can all move on with our day. Finally, nearing the end of the list. How long have I been talking to you guys now? If there's anyone still left here listening to me rambling, well, first of all, thank you. It's much appreciated, and I hope you're enjoying yourselves, and hopefully you've discovered a film or two, and maybe you were inspired in some meaningful way or another, because indeed, 2023 was a hell of a year for films. Look at all the films I just finished talking about. So many of them are going to become classics. There's no question about it, but yet, even so, there's another 5 films I consider to be the most powerful, most potent, most memorable, and most important films of the year. As far as I'm concerned, they will be instant classics. So without further ado, let's finish this list. At number 5, I'm placing Martin Scorsese's The Killers of the Flower Moon. Martin Scorsese is probably one of the most important filmmakers in my life. Would I be here today in this creative milieu were it not for him? Probably not. And at the age of 81 now, he shows no signs of slowing down any of his creative power. In fact, he seems more confident and assured of himself than ever before. This is not only one of his most powerful and engrossing dramas that he's ever directed, which is no small feat. This guy has an immense catalog of incredible films, but this is also without question one of the most historically important films of the year. It shines a light on the atrocities done to the Osage Indians. It's hard to wrap your head around the level of corruption, manipulation, and murder that haunted the Osage people. It is a crushing reality that got swept under the rug, hence the reason why this film is so important, because it is a story that few people know about nowadays. And even then, back in the day, it shocked people to the core, because folks thought this is no longer the Wild West America where there was just savagery and murder left and right. Well, over here in the Osage Hills, unfortunately, it most certainly was the case. But in such a covert, nasty, and manipulative way. Even though this is not an explosive, flamboyant, and exciting film in tone, such as Scorsese's past works like Goodfellas or The Wolf of Wall Street to use for sake of comparison, this film is much slower and more measured and meticulous. Perhaps this is in part due to Martin Scorsese's age, but I do feel that this style of filmmaking lends itself perfectly well to this very bone dry and desert-like feeling of this film. And even though this film may be on the slow burn side, don't think for a second that this film is nothing short of a tour de force in every facet of the filmmaking craft. The set decoration is beautifully reconstructed and authentic, and they also went to film in the very locations of where these atrocities happened, so there is this added layer of authenticity that really helps sell the experience. The intricate costume design is lovely to look at, and once again, authentic for the time period and of the Osage culture. And the cinematography is absolutely stellar, highlighting all these visual aspects. There are so many frames in the film that are just seared into my mind in one way or another. And of course, all of that is uplifted by an incredible score that really encapsulates this feeling of desolation for me. And of course, one of the many major achievements, frankly, of this film is the beyond phenomenal editing work here to capture this gigantic scope of the film and to not have it feel bogged down. Yes, it is a slow burn, it's 3.5 hours, but the pacing, once again, is so measured and meticulous that it never bothered me for a single moment. I was totally sucked in and engrossed from the very beginning up until the end, where there's a very interesting switch up at the end with a very potent coda where Martin Scorsese makes an appearance himself to deliver a message, which kind of bookends the thematics of the film and also gives the raison d'etre of why this film was so important for him to make. I feel like I am spoiling a little bit too much there, but it really is something that just sticks out so vividly in my mind, this epilogue of the film. It really is a creative and ingenious way of ending the film. And of course, we can't move on without mentioning the pitch perfect acting talent in this film. There's a massive ensemble cast in this film, of course, but it is upheld by 3 main actors. I'll start off with Leonardo DiCaprio, who gives a very atypical performance. I think usually we're used to having Leonardo DiCaprio being the charismatic protagonist, being very sure of himself, smart, intelligent, savvy, and suave, all of that. But here he's kind of an idiot and a loser. He's overweight and he's a total scumbag. But there's also this dumb innocence that is really hard to find that perfect balance in, and Leo just walks along the knife's edge perfectly. He might not have gotten an Oscar nomination for this film, and it's not like he needs more Oscar nominations at this point in his career, but even so, I do think that this is one of his most notable performances. I think once again striking that delicate balance of this total scumbag criminal that he's totally guilty of, mind you, but there's also this part of him that genuinely is in love with Molly. Can the two of them coexist? Somehow they do, and he pulls it off brilliantly. Then of course there's Robert De Niro, who plays the mastermind villain of the film, this master manipulator of epic proportion. Yeah, William Hale is quite the powerful character, and I mean that in more ways than one. I think the thing that is most frustrating and daunting about this master villain is the fact that he's able to don this White Knight mask so flawlessly. He fooled so many people, and even for those that could see past the mirage, he was able to just clobber them in so many ways. It really was a masterful and evil performance. But of course, the third main acting power in this film is Lily Gladstone, who is the beating heart of the film and really the foundation of all the moral fiber that is infused into this film. It is a very stoic, quiet, and tortured performance that Lily Gladstone gives, but it is a monumental and historical performance nonetheless. She might not have won the Oscar, but she's definitely going into history books. I did bring up the Oscars a few times now. The film did get 10 Oscar nominations, which is an incredible achievement, and it totally is deserving of all of them. This truly is one of the biggest, most epic, and most powerful films of the year. And no, it didn't win a single one of them. Does this feel like a little bit of a snub? Perhaps, but you know what? Having that many nominations in the first place is legendary status as is. And there's a bit of a historical anecdote. This isn't the first time this happens to Martin Scorsese. The Gangs of New York and The Irishman both had 10 Oscar nominations and they didn't win a single one. But I guess at this point we already know that he's one of the greatest filmmakers of all time and perhaps the most respected living filmmaker working today. I truly wonder if we'll still get another film from him. I hope so. Bring it on, Marty. You are on fire. Not that you've ever stopped putting out incredible works of cinema. Yeah, what a time to be alive. At number 4, we have the massively complex and layered Anatomy of a Fall. Justin Trier creates a intricate puzzle that maintains its ambiguity even months after having seen the film. This film takes place in a chalet in the Alps, and almost immediately after the film has started, a woman's husband falls out the 3rd floor window. What happened? Was it a tragic accident? Were there any nefarious intentions involved here? The evidence is at best inconclusive given the nature of her husband's death, and it doesn't help matters that there weren't any real witnesses apart from their son who happens to be blind. He is of course accompanied by their dog Messi, so those are the only two real witnesses, a blind kid and a dog. That with some very suspicious circumstances, at least as far as metrics are concerned, around this man's death. What ensues for the rest of the film is a grueling investigation that leaves no stone unturned. Every aspect of their marriage is under intense scrutiny. It's easy for us to see the evidence presented and jump to an immediate conclusion, but therein lies the genius of this film. Everything is constantly recontextualized and changes our perspective on the evidence that was presented to us. Your head will be spinning with questions the whole way through. Even after having watched this film twice now, I still don't know if she murdered her husband or not. Much of that ambiguity works as well as it does thanks to the electrifying performances that will keep you nailed to your seat. Sandra Hüller delivers an unshakable performance, and the young boy shows remarkable talent for someone his age. I could go over the whole cast, but that would be rather too exhaustive and it is getting rather late. But I will give a special shout out to Antoine Reinhardt, who plays the prosecutor. That guy was relentless. Oh my god, what a force to be reckoned with. I would not want to go up against him. The acting prowess is terrific, of course, but it helps when actors have what I consider to be the apex predator of screenwriting this year in their hands. Not only did this film win the Palme d'Or, but it also won the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. Writing credits are shared between Justine Triet and her husband, Arthur Harari, which is something that I didn't fully realize until much later. It's an incredible pairing and is one of the core reasons why this film is so nuanced in its devil's advocate approach. We hear every possible side of the story and it is fascinating, confusing, and engrossing. It may have been the only one Oscar win it had of its 5 nominations, the other nomination being for Best Picture, Best Director, Justine Triet being the only woman director that night nominated for that Oscar, and of course, Best Actress in a Leading Role, and then Best Editing. But even with that one Oscar win, it was still one of the major highlights of the night, and a reminder that sometimes the Academy gets things right. Truly, this is the best courtroom drama I can think of in years. Moving on to number 3, a film with a much humbler scope. But that does not rob it of any power it may have. Past Lives is a sensational romantic drama that burrowed its way deep into my heart. This is without question my personal heartthrob of the year. My melancholic, hopeless romantic side of me is just drenched in the tears that I shed watching and then contemplating this film. Past Lives tell the story of Nora and Hae Sung, two people who have had a remarkable bond as children in South Korea. Unfortunately, Nora's family emigrated to Toronto, cutting short a relationship that felt destined to happen. Even in their childhood, you could feel that beautiful bond they shared. I won't go over all the details to not spoil the surprise, but we know that decades later, both star-crossed lovers, so to speak, meet again for a fateful week in New York City. With that premise alone, you may already be coming to conclusions on your own of where the film was going to go, and I'm not innocent of that either. I did the same thing initially when I first discovered the film. But it doesn't go quite the way we think it will. And actually, the opening scene of the film perfectly mirrors that. It's as if the director knew exactly where people's minds would be going with this. Instead, we are treated to a delicately nuanced drama in surprising ways. It of course explores themes of love and destiny, but there's a much larger focus on choices and how they build our life and identity. The film received 2 Oscar nominations in some pretty major categories, which made it something of an underdog in this award season. It got nominated for Best Picture and Best Original Screenplay. Fortunately, it didn't win anything, but I still consider this to be a resounding success. And keep in mind that this is Celine Song's debut film. She shows talent and wisdom way beyond her experience as a filmmaker. I mean, look how far up it is on this list. How many legendary filmmakers has this little film flown past? Yes, it really is that good. Past Lives is a piercing romantic drama that will leave you devastated in the best way possible. Alrighty, for the final 2 films, I debated endlessly which one should be at the number 1 spot, number 2. I did so much back and forth. But ultimately, who gives a damn? These are the 2 most remarkable films of 2023. By now, I'm pretty sure everyone figured out what these 2 films may be. Is the excellence of both these films even a debate at this point? The first magnum opus we'll be talking about is Yorgos Lanthimos' Poor Things. It is a wild movie. I mean, what did you expect? This is a Yorgos film after all. The film, as you might expect, has a rather bonkers premise. In essence, this is a coming-of-age story, though by far the strangest I've seen of its kind. I'll do my best to go in as little bit as possible, but I'm pretty sure by now everyone knows at least the major lines of this film. Bella Baxter is brought back to life by a very unorthodox scientist. Basically, we have a child in the body of a fully grown woman who is learning the ropes on everything in life. Throughout the film, she will embark on a journey where she will learn not only about herself, but the world. Her innocence frees her from the normal trappings and prejudices we place on ourselves due to society norms, which leads to some pretty uproariously funny moments. Truly, this might actually be the funniest film you'll see all year long. And yes, as you may have heard, there's a lot of sex in this film. But even with its promiscuity, it never felt like it was abusing its presence. The film actually has a really interesting perspective on that topic, though I guess you do need the full narrative arc to have that fully sink in. Truly, this is a whirlwind of creativity unlike anything else. It is one of the main reasons why I struggled so much whether to place it at the #1 spot, because it is just so unlike anything I've seen ever before. I know it feels like I say that all the time, but this is a beyond remarkable film in that regard. The cinematography has a very peculiar way of using fisheye lens, which at first glance is very uncanny and bizarre, but that is exactly the purpose with this young Bella Baxter who's in a very uncanny state herself. It's used to beautiful effect, but also all the color palettes, the visual compositions are to die for. There's so many remarkable moments that I could just rave on unendingly. The set decoration and costume design are just as gaudy, weird, and gonzo and out there as anything else in the film. And the score is probably one of the most peculiar, unique scores I've heard in any film, mirroring this very uncanny and toy box quality to it. It's quite fascinating and once again unique. Now, as you may have heard, the film is also a prime example of an acting powerhouse. I'll leave the lead role for a bit later on, but let's just start off with Mark Ruffalo, who gives his funniest performance ever. While Bella Baxter seems to be growing and growing with each and every scene, he seems to be just degenerating back into these like childlike tantrums. Honestly, he left me in stitches on multiple occasions. The rest of the supporting cast is equally wonderful. I won't go over all of them because some of them do have short but very memorable moments as well. But of course, Willem Dafoe as the mad Frankenstein scientist is a sight to behold. It is amusing that Bella calls him God. Of course, this is a play on word, but his name really is Godwin Baxter, so it's not factually incorrect in a way, but we all know what's being played here. But of course, Emma Stone gives a sensational performance. In a year where there are so many fantastic performances, I think this is the one that sticks out the most for me, specifically in the technical and creative complexity of the nature of the role itself. It was an absolutely fearless performance from Emma Stone, where she bears her mind, body, and soul to all of us. All the subtleties of Bella Baxter's character as she grows throughout her journey is quite incredible to behold, and I think it's a lot of fun to rewatch the film to catch up on all these tiny little details. It really is a monumental performance, and she totally earns her Oscar, because once again, in terms of the level of complexity, the technical complexity and creativity of that role, I don't think anything comes anywhere close to it. And finally, it is worth mentioning that this film was nominated for 11 Oscar nominations, which is simply incredible and almost hard to believe that this kind of wild movie would get that kind of reception, but it is totally deserving of it. And it did win 4 for, once again, Best Actress, and then Best Costume Design, Best Set Decoration, and Hairstyle and Makeup. Once again, this is a whirlwind creative force unlike anything else. And it is rather impossible to compare this film to the one at #1. And perhaps the only reason why the next film is ranked at #1, not only because of its creative powerhouse, but also because it's the most historically important film of the year. There really is only one movie that could have been put at this #1 spot, isn't there? Yes, I did technically give Poor Things a higher score on my channel when I initially reviewed it, and I still stand by that score, mind you. But I've had a whole year with Oppenheimer now to have it just stew in my brain. I saw it on Barbenheimer Day in IMAX, and that was a thunderous physical experience. It literally shook me to my very core. And months later, it still remained in my mind. Now I've seen it multiple times, and now since I'm so familiar with it, I almost listen to it in a podcast-like format while I'm working. It really is a film that has rather consumed my mental thought when it comes to cinema in 2023, and probably will continue to do so for years on end. Oppenheimer is the biographical drama of J. Robert Oppenheimer's life. He is the man who directed the Manhattan Project, which led to the development of the first nuclear weapon during the Second World War. We see the beginning of his scientific career, and we see exactly how he took up the mantle of responsibility to lead the team that led to the creation of the atom bomb. Incidentally, I thought it was fascinating how he wasn't necessarily the mastermind scientist behind this whole project. He'd openly delegate tasks to other people who he felt were smarter than him for the given task at hand. So it's actually a truly fascinating exploration of leadership skills at the same time, actually, which is something that really inspired me. And then the rest of the film explores this subsequent trial built against Oppenheimer, orchestrated in an attempt to ruin Oppenheimer's political influence. All these different timelines have a way of weaving in and out of each other, creating this complex, layered web of events. It is a gigantic 3-hour epic that builds and builds and builds into this crescendo boiling point. And literally every facet of the craft of this film, the sound, the music, the editing, literally all built to this one explosive point, which curiously mirrors the power of the atomic bomb itself. I'm sure that this was a deliberate creative decision. You truly do want to see this film on the biggest screen with the best sound possible, because this is an enthralling physical experience. It is stupendous from every facet of filmmaking. I love the meticulous attention to detail to creating authentic set decorations that respect the time period. But perhaps most ingenious is the creativity used in the cinematography. There's this meticulous insistence on using practical effects in this film, which leads to some of the most experimental and fascinating visual effects captured on film. Honestly, it made the film feel like this almost like transcendental experience. That, paired with the score, brings us to this euphoric levels of emotion. This is one of the most rousing and beautiful scores I've heard all year, but it has such a wide range. It ranges from melancholy to beauty to hair-raising horror to something that's absolutely deafening. It truly was a crushing and thunderous auditory experience. In the IMAX cinema, I literally felt like there was an earthquake going through my soul. And I did mention the word terror a moment ago, and this is one thing that perhaps I don't hear all that many people talk about, but there's so many different genres woven into the fabric of this film. We have elements of Western, horror, film noir, spy thriller, and they are all expertly infused in this biopic drama, with these black and white trial sequences as well integrated into the mix, as if there weren't enough things to carry on their shoulders. Which incidentally brings me to the complex, multi-layered script. It's an incredible balancing act of weaving all these timelines and all of that mixing together without bogging down the experience. The pacing and editing of the film made the experience simply electrifying. And finally, this film has the best all-around cast of any film this year. Every actor fits perfectly into this giant mosaic crafted by Christopher Nolan. And then, of course, there's Cillian Murphy, who gives an absolutely transformative performance. I struggle to find the words to express just how much he dedicated himself to this, and it just came out masterfully. He truly deserves the Oscar that he won. Which incidentally, Oppenheimer was nominated for 13 Oscars, which is the most any film got nominated that year. And it swept the awards with 7 wins. For Best Picture, Best Director, a long overdue Best Director Oscar for Christopher Nolan, Best Actor, Actor in a Supporting Role, Robert Downey Jr. as well, long overdue. Best Cinematography, Best Score, and finally Best Editing. This is a monumental achievement in filmmaking, and without question, at least in my books, the best film of 2023. Oh boy, I wonder how long this video is going to be once I'm done editing it. Once again, if there's anyone who's still around here, my god, thank you for being so patient and listening to me ramble on. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm starting to get the swing of these things for the YouTube channel. They're not always going to be this long. I'm kind of enjoying these smaller format film reviews that I've been doing lately. But you know what? I guess every now and then I gotta go all out. And I always do have a habit of going overkill for these year-end videos because I guess it is the starting point of this YouTube channel. And I do like these historical recaps of every year of the films that made an impact on me. So thank you for all the support and views and whatnot from all of you. It's much appreciated. I do these videos really out of pure intrinsic motivation because I really do enjoy the art of me just practicing, expressing my thoughts on films, games, what have you. It is something that has helped me quite a lot, and I do enjoy doing it, and I do think these historical recaps are quite interesting too. And simultaneously, maybe they'll be useful as well for whoever is watching. I'm curious to see 10 years down the line how I will have evolved through not only this YouTube process, but just me, myself, and who I am in this world. So with all that being said, I think I should call it a night by now. I do have work tomorrow morning, and it's definitely past my bedtime, but you know what? These are the sacrifices you make for doing the things you love. So as always, wishing you and your loved ones nothing but the best. Take care and talk to you soon.